Everyone, welcome to another episode of DarshanTalks. I have with us the one, the only Alec Burlakoff, and Alec's been on before. We've done two other interviews with him before, and we talked about just his meteoric rise from from working as in social work, working in social work, all the way through to sales. And we're going to talk about his experiences with the last company he worked for in Pharma. We're going to get into that in a second. But before we go ahead, Alec, do you want to introduce yourself again?
Yep, Alec Burlakoff. Pleasure to be here. Started off as a social worker, but really had a career in pharmaceutical sales.
Yeah, and Alex, we landed up talking a little bit about just the different mechanisms to engage and the way companies sort of were finding value in connecting with patients and connecting with healthcare providers. The last company you worked for was Insys. Now, you want to tell us a little bit, set the stage a little bit about who was Insys, what was sort of their shtick, if you will. How did you get recruited? Kind of go from there.
Right. Well, interestingly enough, prior to going over to Insys, I was in diagnostics. I was in the sleep disorder business. So I actually was out of pharma for about 5 years, maybe a little more, and didn't think I'd ever go back just because of the way things were going as far as sales and the different implications, restrictions on, quite frankly, the way in which I think sales is done, right? Which is interacting with the customer and getting to know them and building a relationship and then leveraging that relationship for more sales. As far as Insys is concerned, one of my sales reps that worked for me at a previous company reached out to me. She was actually out of pharmaceutical sales. Anyway, she was now back in. She was working for Insys. Insys had been in business as far as commercial sales is concerned, I don't know, maybe 3-6 months. And she had made the decision that she was going to go work there. And I had managed her before, and she was smart. She figured, hey, let me reach out to Alec, see if he'll manage me again. This way, I know exactly what to expect as far as my management and my boss, right? I mean, that's the only reason really that she reached out to me, and I fully respect that. I was working full time, doing very well, and I was feeling like I wanted more, like I always do, or like I always did. Problem number one, always wanting more, never being satisfied. And she said, why don't you take this job? I said, yeah, I could do this job, literally work an hour a day and become the number one manager in a couple of weeks, just for class, just the whole landscape of that business. And so I took the job. I told the boss that I was working for in the sleep business that I was taking the job. And he said, okay, I'm glad you were upfront and honest with me. We'll still keep the same arrangement. And that's it. Make it work, Alec. Of course, I didn't tell the pharmaceutical company that I was working full time at another company. And so I was working 2 full-time jobs. And within 2 to 3 months, I was the number one sales manager at the company and being offered the vice president of sales job. So once offered the vice president of sales job, that would entail leaving Florida, where I'd been forever, and moving to Arizona and, really kind of becoming the corporate guy, right? Going to the office every day, having an office, being accountable, working those kind of hours that, really people are more concerned with, where your car was as far as were you the first in the parking lot and where was your car at the end of the day? Are you the last? They're more concerned about that than they are about moving business. So I kind of knew that I wasn't going to be happy, but I was intrigued by being a vice president of sales. That was something new and exciting to me. So I took it and then quit the job in the sleep business. So finally quit that job and was full-time. And I went in with a head of steam. The company was a startup. They had already had a prior vice president of sales. Things didn't work out. The executive chairman, founder, owner of the company was very upset with the lack of sales in the launch and basically replaced that guy with me. So I took over, and the entire company was very apprehensive, nervous, concerned that they may not even have jobs. There was constant threats about losing the job, and it was just a very negative environment when I took over. I like to think that I turned things around. One of the things that I put in place right away was something called a PIP. I did my first conference call, said, listen, you're no longer going to get a phone call out of the clear blue sky telling you no longer have a job. We're going to put a PIP in place. It's a performance improvement plan. And worst case scenario, we'll put you on a 30, 60, 90-day plan. So at least you know what's coming. You can make the necessary changes. You have that option, right? Some people don't want to make those changes. They don't like where the company's going. Or quite frankly, you can use that time to find another job. I mean, I was very candid. That's how I speak. I've always been that way. So that did turn things around as far as morale. People were like, okay, that's a step in the right direction. So that was a big move for me. But really what got people behind me was sales. I was fortunate. I took over the VP job after having already worked there as a manager and literally, blowing sales out the water in a very short period of time. So when I took over VP, I kind of had people's buy-in. That's critical in sales, to have people's buy-in, their support, their willingness to listen to you and follow you. There were many people that didn't like me or my tactics and the way in which the business was going. I could care less. Sales is the 80-20 rule. And for me, it's always been the 98-2 rule. 98% of my business is going to come from 2% of my customers. And in this situation, my customers are my salespeople. So I only needed 2% to get behind me. It's typically 2% of any company that drives all the business. So the ones that didn't like what I had to say, that's called embracing rejection. I embraced it and hoped that they left. Unfortunately, most people don't leave. The money's too good. So we had to consider letting them go. We didn't do a lot of that. I wasn't big on that at all. It just doesn't matter. I'm just going to replace them with the same mediocrity anyway. That's always been my philosophy. So I just spent my attention and my time with the top 2 to 10%. And things turned around. We were the number 1 IPO in the country in 2012. We were the darling of Wall Street. We rang the bell on NASDAQ. We were flying high for a period of time. We did sell a Schedule II opioid, and one has to ask themselves, right? Is Alec a moron? Because do you really want to be the number 1 IPO in the country and producing that level of sales with a Schedule II opioid in the middle of a pandemic? And the answer is no. So.
I just want to clarify, that wouldn't be in the middle of a pandemic, because this is way before the pandemic.
Yeah, 2012.
You mean the opioid epidemic, you meant. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not talking about COVID.
Yeah, okay. Just sorry, my bad.
I'm talking about this thing out there that's called the opioid epidemic, It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't good. It's still not good. And, there's a lot of people out there, the powers to be that want to crack down on that and are exploring every single angle, because you got to come at it, in a million different ways to even make a dent in the problem. And we were one of those dents that they were looking to make.
So it's interesting. There are so many places I want to jump to, but let's start from the beginning, because there's so much there to really sort of delve into and ask some questions around. My first question was, you were outside, you were in diagnostics. Was it the money that pulled you, or was it the risk? Was it the challenge? Like what draws you as a salesperson to change jobs? I
mean, simple answer is all of the above, but for me, I spent many, many years in pharmaceuticals, listening to people above me tell me how to do it, what to do, blah, blah, blah. And I just, honestly, I couldn't stand it. It just drove me crazy.
Right.
Literally having to stifle myself, because I knew there was so much of a better way to do it. And the idea of being able to call my own shots and run it my way really was the biggest lure. I wanted to prove to everybody that, for example, one of the things I wanted to prove that drove me crazy was I wanted to prove that you didn't need to have a college education to be successful in pharmaceuticals. That drove me crazy. Now I have a master's degree, but I can tell you right now, my degrees didn't help me be successful in sales one bit. And the guys that I grew up with and went to grade school with and college and high school and so forth, they're some of the best salespeople I ever know. And I hired those people. Yeah, we doctored the resumes. I hired a guy. The guy interviewed, and he was a nice kid. And he said, Alec, I got an issue. I have a felony. I said, for what? He said, for marijuana. And I said, I don't know. I just fell in love with the kid. And I'm like, I think this kid learned this lesson. I think he's going to be great. And I hired him. I wanted to prove everybody differently. I just had an issue with this arrogance that people have in pharmaceutical sales, that you have to have certain qualifications and so forth and so on that no one else in sales has to have. And I had a problem with it. So I looked for opportunities to, I wanted to hire. First of all, when you hire, the critical element that I look for in hiring is pain points. Just like when you try to sell somebody, you try to identify pain points. When I'm hiring someone and I find out that they've had a difficult time making it this far, whether it be because they came from a broken family, they were a foster child, they had to put themselves through school, being an adult entertainer, whatever the case is, you've got my undivided attention. And I'm thinking, if I give you an opportunity when basically no one else has, for whatever reasons they have, right? They just don't want to risk it or whatnot. If I give you an opportunity, you're going to give me more than anybody else that I could ever hire. I don't care if you have a PhD. I don't care if you're a biochemistry major. I'm hiring the person that has overcome real odds on the street all day long. Now, do I have regrets? Yeah. And would I ever do it again? Not in pharmaceuticals.
Really?
Yeah, because it's just, there's too many holes that people punch through. I still think my theories in general make sense, but there's too many. Well, yeah, but Alec, you hired somebody without a college degree, to sell a Schedule II opioid. Was that responsible? There's other things for me to look at here, and believe me, I've looked and I've scrutinized, and yeah, my job is to second guess myself for the rest of my life so that I don't end up in the same boat that I found myself in and put others in. I still get people. I had someone yesterday call me, asking me for a loan, someone that I hired in Pharma. And I said to myself, I owe $59 million in restitution. I don't have any money to be loaning anyone. And it's like, when is it going to stop? Like, I tried so hard to help so many people. But they want more, and quite frankly, I don't have it. So that's humbling in itself. I mean, I used to, $5,000, I used to give it out to anybody and everybody that asked. $20,000, I'll think about it. I love doing things like that. Why though? The question is why? Was it because I was a good person, or was it because I was actually insecure and wanted my ego stroked and wanted to feel important? I think it was more that, to be honest with you. So, I've had to grow up a lot in the way I do things, the way I think, the way I act. And for me, it's a work in progress. It's a day-by-day approach. And that's where I'm at right now, is constantly reflecting on the decisions I've made, the things I've done, and how I can make better decisions moving forward.
We haven't even gotten to some of the interesting parts, but I find the decision-making process to be the interesting part, because you were in the sleep disorder business. I'm confused because you don't call that pharma. I assume it's medical devices, but is that
it's not pharma. I mean, it's diagnostics. It's actually really small. I mean, I worked for a guy who owned 3 sleep labs in Florida. Okay. Right, and had 8 reps. It's night and day. From pharma, where you have an FDA-approved medication that's going out to God knows how many potential patients.
Right.
It's night and day, Darshan.
So it was the size, it was the impact you could have that drew you, if you will.
Yeah. I wanted to I wanted
You
to
could have
make a
done,
name for myself. Go ahead.
because you could have done all of those things you were trying to prove, which was, I want to have foster kids. I want to have people who had a tough life. I want to give them all a chance. That sounds like a great concept, but you could have done that in your sleep diagnostics gig, but it wouldn't have had the same impact.
It was so on a small level, such a small level that, you know, there was no message was being sent, you know. You know, the people at Insys, I mean, they believed in me. You know, the owner and the founder of the company, you know, he was kind of came from that same philosophy that, you know, yeah, they deserve a shot. You know? And so it was at Insys, it was all about results. As long as the numbers were there, the sales were coming in, you know, life was great. And really, you know, from the time I started to the time I left, the sales were always coming.
How was you talk about sort of not looking the other way, if you will, looking the other way when the kid with the marijuana conviction, for example. How did compliance deal with this? Did you have compliance at that point?
Actually, not really. We had a director of human resources who, when she started, was actually just had a college degree, and then while she was working, she finished her master's. So really not qualified, quite frankly. And you know, and initially we didn't even have any attorneys, but I mean, the compliance, you know, listen. Fact of the matter is had we had a real compliance department from day one, I wouldn't be here as a convicted felon. I mean, you know, look at Purdue, look at the Sackler family, look at the number of patients, you know, that were impacted, far greater than Insys. I mean, we're so small compared to something like that. And you know, the biggest conviction they've ever received was a misdemeanor. You know, that's just part of the arrogance of Insys and the founder of the company that we didn't even need a compliance department. Boy, did we need a compliance department. You know, and I need a compliance department. I need somebody to rein me in because I'm a sales guy and my whole life it's been go, 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 you know, but I've always had people reining me in, you know. And that's a good thing. That's that check and balance system that everybody needs in life.
So HR, compliance, none of these guys were reining you in. The other thing you pointed out was you were a manager at the sleep disorder place. You came in as a manager in Insys. Depending on the company, typically between the manager and the VP, you've got an entire multiple directorships and stuff like that you'd usually go through. You jumped all of that. Do you think you were ready for, I mean, you obviously demonstrated the sales, but were you ready for the learnings that would have happened during a directorship if you would have gone through it? And what I mean by that is that's where possibly you would have had compliance conversations. You possibly would have had people telling you, here's why you don't do some of the things that you want to do. Or do you think you were put into the place, you were just the right person at the wrong time in a position where you caused too much impact, if you will?
I don't know. Those are tough questions. I mean, I think you could always learn more. You could always be smarter, and experience brings that. I was a director. Of sales in the sleep business. I was a director of sales. I was a director at a company in Worcester, Massachusetts at one point. So I had managed managers before. You know, I have strengths and weaknesses. My strengths are that, you know, I can motivate, I can speak, I can teach, I can create a sales message, and I can get on the ground and actually sell to the customer. And so I played to my strengths. You know, my weaknesses I farmed out. You know, we had a director of sales operations who was brilliant, and you know, he was my right-hand man. You know, anything I needed as far as reports and data and presentations and you know, bonus calculators, comp plans, I handed all that to him. You know, I just focused on what I knew and what I could do best. And what I knew. I focused on what I knew I had to do in order to keep my job.
Right.
I can tell you, the slogan at Insys was Alec, stay in your lane. Everybody had a lane. Stay in your lane. Focus on sales. I mean, when we started to see negative things happen, a story of, a patient having complications, ending up in the ER, ICU, or even worse, I would ask, we all would, any normal human being would be, hey, what's going on there? What'd you hear? Are there any implications for the doctor who prescribed? And the response was very, robust and intense, stay in your lane, and we really don't want you getting involved in that. We don't want you talking about that. In fact, do a conference call, do crisis management, make sure everybody's upbeat and motivated and is doing their job and getting out there, delivering a message that ensures every physician that, what we're promoting and selling here is what's in the best interest of the patient. It's always patient, but really, unfortunately, in sales, it's really about the company and their bottom line.
So whose lane was that, though, to ask the questions about opioids? So it's not sales to ask those questions about patients being harmed. So whose lane is it? I mean,
but listen, why isn't it my lane?
That's my question. That's exactly my question.
It's everybody's lane. Everybody has a right. If I'm selling a product and things aren't so, everything looked great, but now we're starting to see the other side.
Right.
And it's troubling. I mean, it's everybody's lane, right? But, when you work for corporate America, I'm not the only, anybody who works for corporate America is going to tell you that, oftentimes you're stifled. And you ask questions that are considered to be alarming or counterproductive or just even distracting. And, somebody tells you, focus on, your job responsibilities,
Sure. But I assume this is the owner, this is the founder telling you this. And or is it someone different at this point?
Well, I had a superior, I reported to a CEO.
Right. So
most of my a lot of my interaction was with him. I did have interaction with the founder at least once a week, sometimes twice a week, maybe even more. But it was the CEO's job to control everybody with the company and make sure that we didn't, say something stupid or out of turn, in a meeting, which we had at least once a week, where we were at the table with the owner. If I had said that, I knew better than that. I mean, I would never ask that question sitting at the table with the owner. I know he would go crazy. But I thought I had a relationship with the CEO where I could ask that question, and I did. We had somewhat of a relationship, but he was just doing what he thought was best for me and the company and everyone else, which was trying to keep me focused on the task at hand.
So who did the CEO think, whose lane was it according to them? I'm trying to understand, was it supposed to be it's compliance's job to look into that, it's medical's job to look at, like, what was their thought?
Medical affairs, right? I mean, we did have someone in medical affairs. It would certainly be their job to look into that. And I know that, they would, keep things quiet, probably for multiple reasons, good reasons, like, HIPAA reasons, like patient confidentiality reasons. Not necessarily because they were being sneaky or non-transparent. But again, if you read something in the newspaper or you go to the doctor's office and the doctor shares something with you, now you have knowledge of it.
Yeah.
And it's a tough thing. Even if it's one patient,
right.
We hear that all the time. Oh, but it was one patient out of hundreds. It was 3 patients out of thousands.
Right.
Those are ways to rationalize or justify, and help you move forward. But, if you're a human being, and many people, who have read about me and learned about me, they would be like, yeah, this guy's not a human being. Like, how could he continue to do what he did, knowing that patients were suffering, were getting hurt? It's not easy. It takes a lot of, I want to say, mental toughness, to be able to deal with that. Certainly, we didn't have any interaction with the patients or their caregivers and family members, and for many reasons. But again, that helped you sell, right? It's so much sadness, so much regret, so much reflection, and so many things that I don't like, that went wrong. First and foremost, though, I take responsibility for my own actions. I could have left that company whenever I wanted. In fact, the vice president of marketing did leave that company, and he did say to me, for lack of better words, leave the company. And I was trying to negotiate, exit clauses and figure out ways to hold on to my stock and blah, blah, blah. I had done so much. I had worked so hard. Me. And of course, the company would never give me the parachute, right, to leave, because they didn't want me to leave. We have another product coming, after you launch that next product, then we can talk about it. It's like, you gotta be a man. You just gotta say, no, I'm leaving. Screw the money. And it sounds really easy in this conversation, but money is powerful, and it can make things a little bit more difficult in the heat of the moment.
So, did you ever talk to the VP of sales who was there before you? Do you know why that person left? Was it just lack of sales, or was it they were trying to follow the book and that's why they had the book thrown at them?
Well, no, I don't know. I just know that there were lack of sales. But, listen, you have to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. There's always, two stories, and then there's the one in the middle that actually is the truth.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that in some ways he wasn't nearly as aggressive as what the company was looking for.
Right.
And quite frankly, I was a mark. I was a great target. You look for pain points, right? Well, they found a pain point in me, right? It was that, I still had not achieved the level of success that I was looking to achieve and that I had been spending my career doing. And I've had, numerous successes in numerous companies where I was always the top guy, blah, blah, blah. And I think they just saw it, they saw somebody who was hungry and willing to do anything and everything to get the job done and prove himself. And I was.
So, and again, we're going to have to obviously have you back because we haven't gotten to the, and it's just every time we talk, there's so much more sort of we uncover. But let's assume this was day 2. You're at Insys. Day 2 of you being VP. So you have power, you have control. You're at Insys. You want to cause change. How would you have done it differently? Because you know that the opioid epidemic is raging behind you. You need to produce sales. What would have been the responsible way to have done what job you were entrusted with?
I really don't know. That's the best answer I could give you because it's a real answer. The real answer is that in business, there's a way to move business and there's a way to fail again. And if you want to move business, you've got to be bold, you've got to take risk, and you've got to be aggressive. And I don't think that the company would have ever seen, I don't think the doors would have continued to stay open much longer if we had not made the abrupt changes that we implemented. It was a sinking ship. We could have. We didn't need to be as greedy as we were. We could have. We could have done half the business, a quarter of the business, and we still. That's the problem. We turned things around, but and we were driving. I think I've used this analogy before with you. Everybody's driving. The speed limit's 65. Everybody's going 80.
Right.
We're going 100. So we had to go 100 initially to make it, but then we could have backed it back down to 80. And there were people in the company that were saying, "Yeah, we're moving too fast. We don't need to grow this fast. It's too much. It's like, whoa, like stop it. Like, how do we pull back? The thing about sales is it's very, very difficult to pull back because sales is all about momentum. You have that big boulder on the top of the hill. It's almost impossible to move it. But once it starts to move, it goes by itself. The mechanisms that we put in place, like they're literally unstoppable. And the other thing is, once the sales reps, once the managers, once the directors all start seeing the money that's coming in as a result of this formula that they are now understanding, implementing, and executing, they don't want to stop.
Right.
So yeah, you need compliance, but I mean, you would literally have to. I mean, it would just be like an inner war between sales and compliance, which you see at a lot of companies. And you get compliance just keeps firing people to make statements, but they never fire the top 2%. And it's the top 2% that drives all the business. So, I mean, these are the dirty little secrets of the industry. We could have done that. I didn't want to fire people. I've never fired people in my whole career because I know pharmaceutical sales is a shady business. And I believe that if you fire somebody and you basically turn the gun on them, they're simply just going to turn it around on you and take you down. I've been saying that my whole career. I literally can't even tell you anybody that I fired. In fact, I've gone on interviews and they've asked me about firing and they say, yeah, your biggest weakness is you don't fire. But you fire people in pharmaceuticals, you get whistleblowers, which is what happened at Insys.
Wow. So on that cautionary note, we got to call this, but any initial, I feel like we're leading to, we've sort of been speeding this car up and revving it to the 100, and we're going to talk about approaching the wall. So I hope you can come on. We can continue the discussion to talk about that wall and what that was like and that experience of getting that subpoena.
Of course. Yeah, sure.
So, Alec, any last, before we go, Alec, you've got a book and stuff coming, that is out. So do you want to talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. So the book is, it's a cautionary tale. It's a hybrid between my life story and while at the same time integrating 9 key principles of success in sales. The whole idea is for people to get an understanding of who I am and how I basically became the sales leader that I was. It's for people who want to know how to become a top performer, meaning in the top, say, 2 to 10%. But it's not for people who want to be number one, because my book clearly states that if you're going to be number one, your life is going to suffer in many, many other places. That's not the goal here. The goal is to learn from my mistakes and have some sort of balance, while at the same time making a really good living and being successful. And I talk about pain points. In my book, you will understand my pain points that led me and gave me the drive and the passion, the motivation and the hunger to do what it took to try to be successful in sales.
So if you want to hear about that, you want to hear about Alec's journey, feel free to reach out, and that's the URL right there. Alec, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you very much, Darshan. Have a great day.
Pleasure.